So I just want to say Tesha Delay to all of our friends in India. I'm very excited to introduce Ken Paller this morning. Ken is a, Dadul, you're translating, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just start by saying I'm very excited to introduce Ken Paller this morning. Ken is a colleague of mine at Northwestern University and will be playing a central role in the research training program as we move forward.
Professor Ken la ane Dr. Robin Danyamdo Northwestern University tula lomye khan la challenge nangi yore lopi nangi yores and danda maumba danda Robin lagi goti betone 심주기 내림지 왜 제야열에 구쇼도 최청아 권한도에서 패지 제야열에 디나올라 구쇼 겐라 자시 구쇼부 시그레스.
And Ken will be talking about the neuroscience of sleep.
ring tamsena nalola ni ken lagi nita deyogi ani wanzeri netan nelu shigres.
And it's a real privilege to have Ken because Ken's one of the world leaders in the study of sleep and in particular the neuroscience of sleep. So I hope you enjoy this wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much, Robin. I'm very happy to be here with all of you, and I'd like to thank you all for participating and all the organizers who have put this together. And I'm happy to be involved with ETSI going forward. I have very fond memories of my visit to Drepung in 2018 for the ETSI program. And Dawo was my translator that year. It was fun to work with him, and I'm looking forward to that again when I talk to you tomorrow morning. Looking at the room, I believe you're in that room where we had a closing ceremony above the dining hall, and my wife and I stayed at ETSI in a room very close to the dining hall, and we both taught that year.
죽동 제고를 지금 제고 수나서 제고 갑라 아니 코나나 코나기 아니 잠라 페이스 아니 마세 디 야가 페이 갑라 쇼스디양 단다디 단다디 나버서 소소한디다 네버 유겐기 네 심샤지 야서 페미스 갑 게보다 기부초스.
We also have fond memories of 2019 ETSI when we taught at Ganden Monastery.
니도 죽을래 간된 페이지 야게기 롭디단 참베 야게 롭디 뒤질라 간된 페이지 롭디 나베니 디디네 아니양 디디 페베가 당제 여기 니치기 내주 망부직 단데 지그 첨배 유리여보다 아니 대용비 소나 믹스 얘기도.
It will be great to work on some continuing research because, as you'll see, the research I do in my lab is similar to some of the projects you've proposed to do.
네, 가다 용주기 로마고 나로라 나버서다 송데토네 아니 심주 차완나로 냠슈체다 아니 내가 제야겠나 but ngamne deyo sem tona geji tandane ngamne deyo karesna nabazo tanda sinju cheagi chashina yotigengi jushimambuchi konanang gyundeni cheteagi ani sinjuki leshireshas.
As you'll see, we're interested both in how meditation can influence sleep, as well as how sleep can perhaps help with the goals of one's meditation practice.
Jene dandani dandeyogi nedandu teyundu nabasogi niksegi tonan chisadi ani kom dandele jabarina digi nigi bigwala kandes pingreshen pasiga jorwas tenashi on serigi tone nigi nedan la teyundu ni la ani anchi tangzin chetanda ni le shugdanda buta ni le tadi chetanda buta tende tone ya ni sebe negeki ani kom gi chumbe chacha karila ine kendo yongda khandi mi tende la taya yungris.
And I looked over the slides from ETSI Year 5, and I see that you covered some aspects of sleep, such as the many functions of sleep.
Tandadi ki tendebdi ani nitong yaga ki tujuchil lab ngajudi emergency sinili lab chisebe kapi lorungabe lobsengi chogi on seriki nyandepchires.
Our emphasis today will be on these functions in the red box, mainly memory and how that also relates to emotion and health. So how can we know about sleep? The primary way would be with the first person perspective. And as has been mentioned, this is an essential part of understanding the mind, but in my opinion, it's not quite enough. So I think understanding sleep and understanding the mind more generally is a big challenge. So we need all the help we can get. So we also get information from brain activity, as Robin discussed yesterday, from the EEG in particular. And in addition, there's information about the body during sleep, body position, eye movements, muscle activity, the heart, and so on.
never become never teaching lori na
And so this neuroscience approach with EEG has given us some additional perspectives in the last multiple decades that add to what we know about sleep from our individual first-person perspective.
Today is let's say lori ani jigni ku benegogi ani deyogi lebe netan khali gu shengi chigi yobati tongoti june ani ni gi netan la pa deju cheruti 아니 나도 냠용 돈에 시대하기 내주 시야기 내가 뒤 강라 네베로 붙이 돈에 이거라 아니 시야 텐도 요리스.
Whereas when my computer goes to sleep, nothing much happens. Our brains are quite different and they are very active the entire night.
아주 롤레도 비치 제갑라 롤레 딜레가 제갑다 레버다 더베도 롤레 파 뒤체 샤샤베는 딸레가 해 지기야 말이스. 이네 레버데 말이스. 아주 니후도 그지 제레도 뒤에서 지어를 때 니후에 내가 제레 심바 그 상가시시 전체도 요리스.
So our challenge has been and continues to be to try to understand what is all that activity that the brain is producing during the night.
근데 인san 건 세는 니후에 내가 레베 제대하게 레가티 아니 레가티 가리셔 지금도 간데 지금도 세니 대거하기 교련 제야 돼. 다른 아주 지금 탐진 제거야 돼. 내도 직차돼요. 탐진 제거는 시거야. 내도 차돼요.
So I want to explain the different stages of sleep. We will go through them, but at the bottom of the slide, you can see a figure called a hypnogram that shows the progression of stages overnight.
그래서 니기 방림 니기 방림 콜바 내도 시야기 더버 중스 아니 디와기 레모델 때비나 레모디밍을 히프노그램 시그레 니기 퓨림 세베 베리 센 니 쿠베카기 퓨림 민다민다이티 세트인치기 베리틀라 히프노그램 시그레 데직세로나스.
The hypnogram in this case shows 8 hours of sleep going from left to right.
근데 디 레모나라 주주 계rin가게 니기 내단디 시기어레스 연내 예초지디 주주 다제 주주 직내 주주 계버든 누구도 왔어.
And the different colors represent the different stages. So in the first few minutes, you might have a little bit of stage 1, transitional stage to sleep, and then several minutes of stage 2.
근데 니 코베값수 니 코베값수 아데 연철 텐데베 천도도 니기 리버도 땡기요레스 네 리버 당보 니버당도 두왔습니다. 니 당보 세븐에 니 코베 내가 비 까마 가시지는가 먼저 뒤지도 디 나올라 리버 당보 니버도 비우요레스.
Then there's some time in the stages that we call deep sleep.
근데 리버 숨바데 시버딜라 단다 니 투부 코베 내가 비시그레스.
Followed by some additional stage 2.
대주고 근데 주주도 누구 따지고라 당보 고수들이 큐큐스가 리버 당분이와 디세 되네 리버 숨바시버디요 되네 리버 당분이와 되기도 와.
And after that, a short period of a few minutes of REM sleep.
대주고 되네 민구 뉴메기니 민구 뉴메기니 내가
When we call this one cycle, this first progression of stages is one cycle, and you can see there are multiple cycles over a night of sleep.
근데 단지 바레로 제네 배는 지도 당보 유에스 바그네다스도와 라마야치 마치 비sel도디 데리직라 아니 사이클 직 디그레스 콘도로 직 니기 콘도 직 디그레스 디나시 아니 콘도 니바 숨바시바도 스파 컨텐츠기도와스.
And this also shows that early in the night, we have a strong need for deep sleep. So there's a lot of deep sleep in the first 2 cycles. And then once that need is satisfied, there's less slow wave sleep in the next 2 cycles.
그래도 때인데 주주 계rin가게 니 고백가서 니 주주 당보다 니베 내가서 아니 니 규림 니 계림반 당보니와 두스바 규네 용 당신라 리버 숨바데 시바 라바도 시바 니 땡르 보고에 내가들어 니 투보고 내가들어 니 투보고에 내가들 주주 계니 고 온다나 주주 당보니와 나로를 위어레스다 니 도망 고리가 니 투보 보고 이버디 세기어레 되네마 칼리칼리치나 니 투보디 뉴
And as our need for slow wave sleep is satisfied, we have longer periods of REM sleep towards the morning. So sometimes we can have all 6 categories, but we also talk about sleep as just 3 different types to simplify it: the light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep.
lab ki chane shena lab debo yebe ni re ina ya ni ki chane shena ni tubu ku ni nega beres oti ya migu nyume gi migu nyume nyubu maimbe ni gi rimba rete ina ya rimba sumba de shiba ji ni tubu ku beres tene migu nyume ni sene dezen chenbu chulu ku ju ye di sumla pa ko ji jagan de des.
And in the next slides, I will show you how we discriminate amongst these different stages. And in particular, I'll just point out REM sleep is special for several reasons. One is because our eyes are moving around a lot, and that's why we call it REM, rapid eye movement sleep. Now here we see another way of showing the different stages. Just in a typical adult, a whole night's sleep will include different proportions of the different stages. You can see most of this night is in this stage 2, but all the different stages have some number of minutes. And of course, people are different, so not everybody's sleep looks like this. And here's a figure that's kind of complicated, but it shows, I'll tell you how to think about it, but it shows that sleep changes, for one thing, depending on what your age is, from age 5 all the way to 85, shown on the bottom. And the different colors show the different stages of sleep. Here in children, they get more sleep, and as we get older, we seem to typically have less and less sleep as we get very old. For example, if I look in at the graph right at this area for a person who might be 34 years old, I can see that this is the amount of, this represents the amount of time they have in each of the different stages, shown here on the right. I just corrected the number of minutes here. So for example, for REM, we can look at this little box here, and if I look at it on the y-axis, that's the number of minutes. So that comes to about 80 minutes of REM sleep, for example.
第三种的这种的就是老是不是说起把的来下边呢这个 REM 是这个呢民国女母给你民国就家的个吧民国女母民国的你那个比说到马去下多木过去我第一个忙用的是他当然呢他大他带用呢他就说的干嘛从个意思那干嘛是不是个嘛都民国女母嘛的
Now, so adults get less sleep than typical children. And as we get older, you can see slow wave sleep in particular, deep sleep, that gets less and less as we get older, which might also influence the memory problems that we have when we get older.
Slow wave sleep and ni rimba cha cha wena rimba sumba de shiba dimba ni tubu nega dimba ani lona ker ru di nyu ru do wa de chegi ani nga de chamba ma demba do chamba sebu ma yo da di ni tubu kuya de kazu nyu gu do de la hira ra le gres.
So now let's look at the method for deciding on the different stages of sleep, which we call polysomnography, because we are measuring brain activity in many different physiological measures.
Polysomnography Shadimre, what is Lucamina Ginatan Hari make very setting in the la polysomnography grace.
And polysomnography, sometimes we say PSG, is includes the EEG from the head here. It includes recordings about the eye movements, the EOG, and it includes recording of muscle activity, which could be anywhere, but often from the chin area.
Is that polysomnography Dimington Jena PSG cigarette, remote now has cigarette lamna, ni netam chentaji kapi, ani lepegi, lepeg chegogi, perina said the EEG set. Then I see ani muscle ki shane the yogi chegoti shane the yogi chegoti namju netu le the mancha malin lingres or then I see any mig buju jatan khali jagu ti netu ti kasota lo netu bitone ani remote the same grace.
And here on the right is segments of just the EEG recordings for about 30 seconds for each of the stages.
They say they are remedy, Remukanga, the remedy, Lukamgi, number has neck among Boyvenolone, Lebachigogi, EEG Chigogi Peridres, Nigi, but Tambuni was super shiva negative, Lepata de Yogi, Lebecha, what the Yogi, very says 7 the rest, and you EEG Chigo in Bocasila, Nasik Miladua.
And stage one is shown here. It has these small amplitudes and some small eye movements, and you can see it's very similar to the waking EEG. I'll show you in the next slide as well.
Let's say Lori Casor Joel Tevinati, ni seven negata Shera Kirayomaris, Dinalogi, Chiki Casore, Lucky Darpanda with the Darpan, the Hazan.
Stage 2 has some additional features. There's the K complex shown here and a sleep spindle shown here.
Let's say Lorigi number 7 the Mendai original Nishi Southern remove Southern Segres. Rebachigi K complexion, K thrombus, Link touch, Namju, they was the sleep spindles 전에 방마 방마 니기 방마 전에 거야 그게 제대 양지 착각 주고 막 보여 되겠지. 근데 라 spindles
Thank you. As stage 3 and 4, together we call that slow wave sleep or deep sleep. And you can see it has these larger waves known as slow waves.
ni que después un poco si va ni nyamdo domne de la lab que chane chane lab demo que ni sigro vas o ti que tu tabita ani que pasore slow wave chane lab demo ingi que mu de hajangi manga che sebushin tungu was.
And REM sleep I'll show you on another slide, but for now let's look at the transition from wake to sleep.
REM ki ni mingu nyume nega ki ani let's say lori di khadi imi di shugo tengi tangya na de ni khubne ni sebne ni khube nega du ani pan broyondu ani lukam ki nedan khadi du ta hos.
The transition is very gradual and different components change at different times. So it's hard to identify the exact moment of the transition, but here we can see that there's more alpha activity here, which is big in the back of the head, and then it's slightly reduced here, and this would be called on the right stage 1.
Then EEG, that ni 7 ni khube nega bla an kandes sikpa pherudu de phedan de dan de yogi ani let's lori de mig lori de soba ni ningda ani shane lori de wa nge tangbu de let's lori de lebe ne dan de bina ni thoma 7 ani thom tangbu khube nega su jik chasha da jik mar mam chi issue alpha ki lab ki ne dan de mam chi mambu yebse ne paru che ne ani ne ta ni ki ba tangbu ka du re di alpha ki lab ki person de
Now, there are 4 lines here. I'll go through it a little bit. Every recording has 2 locations. So the first one is C3 on the top of the head, referred to behind the ear. And the second one is the back of the head, referred to behind the ear. And you can see the alpha is bigger on the second one.
let's say lori jigo ine tangbu de niga let's say lori de do let's say lori imba khanshi la lebe ne minda ki la ani longe tu che ti ki ani let's say de yogi chego gi remote setan de ani nang se tos minda imdu was.
The third one here is from electrodes to the side of the eyes, and these waves here are reflecting the eyes moving around, both when you're very sleepy and when you're in stage 1.
ni dan de yogi ani let's say ki chegore mi dan de chegore di sayadi ni sebene thoma khu ne gapche ani shugo ni gde ba tambol shugo ne gapro chega padu chega ma oti ji dan de remusumba di mi gu guje dan de yogi ani na badres di longe mi gde am de tu che ta yong du ni thoma sebene khu ne gogi chegode ki dodan da ne ma ni ki ba tambol dodan di riba da ni guje gi riba tos minda was.
And here we see a little calibration marker. So it tells us that this distance from left to right represents 3 seconds, and this whole thing is 30 seconds, whereas the distance for the up and down is in microvolts. 50 microvolts is this big. So you can see the eye movements are bigger than 50, maybe 200 microvolts.
Thomas 7 ma thale ni gre batambo ne ko sa peltan ne ke chegi sa ni video ja chadang le ga le tabi ne tawe di yongzo di did you say 30 seconds the whole
thing, yes.
Yeah, the chadang de mo chadang di kacha sumju ki nangi ne dan de sinja magi wa de la dan de chaga se men de changa tu de ya na la ni video ja tang ge ba de la no me da bi ti any second kacha sungunam sumota dina logi video ki darban so gorwa pang commendi keba shudu kaunde du toase manam matis mantrosos.
And the fourth one is the muscle activity from the chin, and you can see that the thickness of the line tells us how active the muscles are.
And Remushivadi, ni Toma Koya Gotombane, ni Ribatambo Doyapagi, any Shani that they would you ribatis, Shani would you num Pasol and Nefidi, Malin to Temperes, in the remote time, the remote Tambo to Puche, and she would have to do us. Has it two of this to Shani with your mamma, you think you're the Nina should do and Shani would you use.
Okay, and here I have another example. Actually, just to say here, let's see. Yes, here is just to show the different stages. You can see what we showed before, the different types of EEG activity in the different stages. And this is describing the different sort of EEG markers we see, the alpha, the spindles, and the slow waves that I want to tell you a bit more about.
And the Diwag, remote day, and ya, ni 7, and ni, but when you were shoot, they should go any, Mingu, you may be Nego Nigi, Chendan Chetangi, number Medaches. Then Olola, let's say Lori, Kodra, let's say Lori, Kodra Olola, Tonanjan, Takoya, Kepakari, Metakoyadi, Alpag and Netan Candidation, Palmang and Netan Candidation, Smith Spindle Kit, Love Kit, Pichik Taylor, the Yolo, Netan Candidation, to do Takuyoris.
Okay, so the different waves can be described in terms of the frequency of the rhythm, as Robin described a little bit yesterday.
I'm going to love you call a Geshe race. Love you going to Geshe and the court, Little Lori, and low day Japanese race. The Harskitone, Tanda Kasa. Frequencies of Dechugi, Harsky, and French Jung Geshe for Shechugris. Lapiton Geshe, Netan Haran Geshe Shepris.
So, what do we mean by EEG rhythms? Perhaps one way to think about that is with something else that has a cycle. For example, a prayer wheel, you can spin it very slow or very fast, and we talk about the frequencies.
Let's say Lori Kodrodi. Let's say Lori Kodrodi, any Yanaji, the Jugatan, Harsky came Manu Geshe, Yana and Love Chan, Taylor, the Jolly, the Geshe. This year, the Kadijala Samatana Chogram, not Kodrodi, Manila Wokoya, and she for a Konstantic Ni Sumshen. The any Kacha Manu, the Vutinarola, Kazuko, Kotu, Kazuko, take Netanji, Tiajorva. Or and Samatana, let's say Lori Kodus, degrees.
So if you spin the fur wheel pretty fast, perhaps it would go around all the way around 2 times every second. We would call that.
Manila, what the Yoshus Corne, Kashigan on the Kora Kanzani, Kurgiana, that the sugar channel, the hertz charges.
And we could call that a frequency of 2 hertz, means 2 cycles per second.
Oh, the day quality Kashigan on the Kora Kanzani, Javina, and the sugar channel Geshe has knee in the Chabres.
Now, the EEG doesn't go around in circles, but it also has a rhythm where the amplitude goes up and down. You can see starting high, going low, up and down. Here's the mathematical equivalent of the sine wave going up and down. So in this example here, if this is 4 seconds, the rhythm is making a full cycle here once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. There are 4 cycles within the 4 seconds, which is equivalent to 1 cycle per second or 1 hertz.
Is that the Remonon session? Tangi let the Lori remove pendage saying, you know, Pende said, the Chundoni, Kajashina, Pende saying, you know, and Kajashi, usual warriors, Pendegi, any Pendeg Cheledi, Jubella. Then Pen Puginashi, Chele Jubella, Kajashi Govina, here Cheledi Nalola Casor, Porto Remudella, 마 야치 마중 시상도 시상도 거래 시사버리스 가서 시라 거래 시면 잡면은 아니 가서를 거래를 와 이제 대쇼 차는 재면은 근데 그 레모디 대쇼디 아니 할 수있게 되죠 사버리스.
Now, another way to describe the same thing is to ask, how long does it take for one cycle to start and come all the way back to the same place, just like the prayer wheel goes all the way around? So we can call that a wavelength and say one cycle lasts 1,000 milliseconds or 1 second.
Then very tagarang the ship of Mendes and laptop phone get share, laptop phone scene, and then laptop manu theoris. The laptop the really condemned the figure to not tangi conduit the porridge back at the laptop city, and Garsore Magi Remona 7 Shiche. Can go to Bone Chugudi Mage that laptop chin and love the chick by young should do or young Yunkori Chigi, usual usage, no tilla laptop chicks regulation, that thank you forget the millisecond tons Gorvina and a second chick Gorvina, and fill a laptop set yet on discovery. So that was Titan Midajamado, yet on Chico the race.
The bottom example is now a faster rhythm. So within 4 seconds, there are many more cycles, and we could count the cycles and come to the conclusion that the rate is now 3 cycles per second, or 3 hertz, 3 times as fast.
The Castle, do you chip a culture she nala? Is he any control of the control George Chibina, Devil Membership, George Shini, any control for a Chatham for a play Castle, 2 dua, Kendeji to Ruina, any culture to chip and control Tangati. Mount Chimba that they can carry or lana, and Dutch passion brace, catch chicken on the Kora Kadija, Tanka patch in Brava. Then I see any lapta, any chicken, somebody barugi, any tardy, Pony Chimbaris, George Chimberwa. Is on Bitsi you do any Dubsumgi Chaperjuiza. Kachachigla, Hachine, Sumcha, and Lapagi said, any millisecond chignalola, Castle Piparugi, Kawa, Ni Parugi, Yang said, and Tangile, any Dub Sumgi, Yun Chimbris, Pun Chimbris.
So rhythms can be described either in terms of the frequency or in terms of the wavelength. For brain rhythms, we usually talk about the frequency.
For what?
We can describe rhythms either by the frequency in hertz or by the wavelength.
Yes.
And brain waves, we usually describe them by the frequency.
Oh, okay. Today is a wave. Rhythm. Let Lori Kodojura. The rhythm is on any CW on the Geshe Kabla. Any Yana Desho on Geshe and a laptop on Geshe. Lever the day you get any quarter to the Manchavala, any Hals Kitakavis on a Hals Tibetone, and the Juk in the Tanshi.
And here's just another example from an earlier ETSI program. You can think about electromagnetic radiation goes all the way from radio waves to gamma rays, and a little segment of it is the visible light of the different colors. And so this is also different frequencies of electromagnetic radiation.
Oh, that is electromagnetic radiation. Then the radiation in the frequency from Geshe that forget the pretty the Yangji, Germany, Tondo, Nadu Toyagi, Tondo, Laptop, Kagiki, Tondo, Tongi, but I never that in the Laptop cigarette.
A funny story is that a friend once confused gamma rays that come from the sun and are very harmful. Those are not the same as the gamma EEG signal that comes from our head. Very different.
Gamma rays said the gamma said the never shoot your to Connie. Any Tara, any Shabel Hamla Kabne, Parkab Cheche, any Lebata de Yogi, any laptop and all the gamma rays, gamma waves, the Geshe, you never your some get choose.
And here I've listed some of the different brain waves that we have measured, and we still have to understand what is the meaning of these waves with respect to brain function. That's an ongoing question.
The din on said any Tatabu any leopard and the Taji Seratone, do shave, lebegi, wave, lebegi, laptagi, any Dushugi, Netanda, and laptagi, near Tangachitanga, Pendegi, Borset, Mindaris, Netan Minda, Borset, Kaneka, would you be with the Netanis? The pending nephew to do remato, nephew, really, any penalty alpha region, alpha gain, junior bag has the any Karsigi or Tiparu in the Manu big Tanda Harre, Nangden Harre, Kesen career, return career, shadow, Tizu, and the savage the Singiomaris, Lapagi, remember Minda, we with the Singioris.
And just for comparison, a heart rate might beat once every second, and that's about also called 60 beats per minute. That's a typical heart rate. 1 hertz.
Did you say 1 second?
Yeah, once per second is the same as 60 beats per minute. Those are the same equivalent rate of, and now it's a heartbeat, so it's not a cycle, but it's a question of how often does your heart pump blood. So let me give you some examples from slow wave sleep now. So first we can see the typical waking EEG, and you see it's a very complex signal. This is maybe 25 or 30 seconds. And if we look at this mathematically, we can show that this complex pattern includes all the different frequencies. If we compare that to stage 3 of sleep, we can see the signal is different. In particular, it has these larger, slower bumps superimposed on top of the normal EEG. Now we can take this EEG signal and mathematically decompose it into different parts. For example, these 2 parts in red and blue. And by decomposing, we can see 2 different aspects of slow wave sleep. We can see the slow waves here in red, and then right here we can see what's called a sleep spindle, which is also here, but it's harder to see. now it's quite easy to see in blue.
Then, but ni rimba sumba kubi nego chigogi kaza ni shuringa di nangi namju de rede namju di remove tambu save nalola nam nedanuji de chashabine nedanuji ni mata ibe ni to debes nedanjires di pain kateona wagi nesuti nalola se de tidang ani gangi mabudi se ni nyamdo debne ani rimba sumbe nedan chadgoyore sinza 카테비나 마우디 토용디 랍 마우이 남주디 세우시 토구도스 이 강라 네베 가리 예부디 랭게 야게 나고체니 예디 갑라 세우시나 하도야디 카테용디 아니 고 카카테니 머게 와데 스핀들체네 파마기 남주기 니기 파메 남주기 즉 파마네신 거르 남주지 등도와 디 남주디 보기나 예부디 아니 카테용디 세우차그레스.
And now we can see the same information bigger here. You can see one slow wave and one sleep spindle. That's what they look like.
Yesa tagi pagi tanda nam kunyi keba yosa yore sesa tagana nikdu ne kochimbuso ne tabina netan di chabres jigde lap debu gi netan di hajang ngwe se debu de chimbuso tua di nanglo la kita nyamdo ani ni ki phangme namju di pogina segi yobdi neta seb chabduas.
And an interesting thing about the slow waves is we can separate out two parts of it. It has a part where that we call the up state, which is when it's making a peak in green here.
And lap demogi letangero lap demu ribach lap perigero lap demu sendon checking peridi kola mixage kariyalna lap demu sheni yuti kola ya nangse ki yawa cheni koyogi tengi babdi kanditu wagi bab kanditu chen tayagi ya netu chik netanu sawaji nigres.
And then the part where the wave is going down, we call the down state.
Cheni lap di ma bab yondu gi netanda ya par yondu gi netan chugro to pra yu lap demu chen rugi ya ma chi bab ya ji da che yugi ya and ya tel sunbe negative da ma bab negative nibutila ya nangse ki taya ji yore tila tengi nebab da oge nebab cheni lap chibuji la inayo nangse ki yawa cheni taya yore.
And if a slow wave takes about 1 second for the both parts, each part is about a half a second. The up state a little bit bigger than a half second and the down state a little bit smaller, but it's divided into those two parts.
Kisi lap demu kang chik di kyon dombe lap demu kang chik di ma chipab ya chaya di ki kashi chik golgu yu na ani di nangse ki kyusu di koshi jabi na tengi nebab jubya la kacha chega le mangsi gorea da oagi nebab di jubya la kacha chega le yung chen kunyu dombe kacha chik jubdan di du charugu yores.
And one fact from neuroscience in animals is that during the up state, the neurons in our brain are very active. And during the down state, the neurons are very quiet all over the brain.
And mita and dunduda, the Junetana, Gendugi, Lebe Netana, Wanze Netana, Tayondi, Lap Kaganchik, Lap Gigantic Netan Shabine, Lap Demuji, Lap Demujiranchik Netan Shabine, Perchi, Nangsegi, and Tengi Never Kabla, Yan Leba Hajangi. Tungche debuta ani tungche debu yebuta and la tungdu chimu de yama de digi ani wag nebel ma phabi undi ani chasore sik selongi ngar gi dabdi haja ma cha de neta yoris.
And I can show you one more example of EEG where you can compare the very different appearance of a period of stage 3 slow wave sleep on the top versus REM sleep on the bottom.
In the wage mo di say de ni let the lori nang lo ngwen dan di ni rimbasumba mingu nyumu mai be rimbasumbe ne gapi ni lapi joeta ni mingu nyumu ne gapi lapi joedi peri kon stay on dune hajam minda ye di seven was.
Now tomorrow morning we will talk a little bit about the ways to measure this activity, but I want to introduce some of these methods right now.
Sani shoge nabasu gilla ngode chadi 데데기 랍타도 컨디시기 티자고레신 컨디스 세자고레신 디콜 사니 감시는 그레스 네 디단데 여기 세자야기 요제도 모두 비시기
Now, in a laboratory, a sleep laboratory like mine, we connect all the wires together and get very good recordings of high quality. But there are other methods that are wearable that are easier to use, although not as high in quality.
나 걔나 호나랑기 찰레나사기 다제칸 샤샤비나 아니 니단데 다제 셰브갑라 아니 마니에제 아니 루비네 민다민다 노니 투야기 취제도 하자기 가게보다 아니 14보 열에 데이터네 장도 라야도 이네 하자기 세보다 노보다 아니 14보 열에서 근데랑 굉장히 가서 가는 동기 말로 왔어 데 맞음네 다도 이제 칼간점기 니단데 여기 장체 뒤야기 된다나 아니 된다 지금 그걸 거야기 제대로 여기 취제도 열에서
Now, so the highest quality is when we can record brain activity, but we can also measure other things such as movement. We call that actigraphy, or we can measure the heart rate and the body temperature as well.
네, 니들 여기 니 세부 쉬우지 하고야 라 레베 이 제고도 하고야 예신 부착이 요레스. 근데 맞으네 지기 미국 구조다보다 닝기 답그 답변다보다 아니야 그 구조다보다 대수역 니주 통에 아니야 니들 여기 가서리 체제야 can progress.
Okay, on the left, in the bottom left, we have a device that's called the Rhythm, and actually I got one in the mail yesterday, and it's a device that you put on your head like this, and it records from the forehead the EEG.
와게 레모디 나로 색도와 단도 견라테나 신기 레모디 튼딩도디 what does it measure? Rhythms from where?
It measures the EEG from the forehead.
Okay. ngazu나 disagree. 동기 듄데. 동기 듄 forehead sigdo ngazu pego ki samgi. That sometimes scalp sigdo. 제니 ngazu나 터바로 터베기가 내단기 터베기 그 차시되기 EEG 레저 로리기 예주지네 doing this.
I've lost my slides for a second, but let me tell you about the next one. Another method is to use a device on your wrist, like a Fitbit, and it can measure two things, your movement and your heart rate.
근데 주제 니버데서 걔라데 던데비 툭송 그 라송 이네요. 요제 니버데 나도 지금 럭둡나 시체네 그 거야지 요레스 럭둡나 시체 거야 수주 거야는 시체 거야지 디거버 되게 주네 아니 닝기 퍼딩기 세단 아니 구주기 내단 디나라 same risk.
And then another device is I'm wearing on my finger. It's a ring, and it comes with a charger, so you can put it and charge it. And the ring is a device that measures your movement and your heart rate and your temperature.
네, 근데 주제 측이 그래서래 럭둡나 시체 저거는 시체 거야요. 그래서 저거는 시체 마마고 거랑에라고 로사 비슈고 아니 로 야보사 비슈고 아니 거거제 저거는 시체 거베나 거베디 주네 구주기 내단디 세그레 근데 닝기 퍼딩체 디가라 리뷰 주체 아데서 건가 거기 체제제 땡그리스.
And I'm trying to put the slides back on. I think I've got it here. Can you see them now? Okay, let me go to where I was here. Sorry about that, little technical problem, but solved it this way. Okay, so there we go. And so these devices give us an approximation to sleep stages. So they're not perfect. They're not as good as the laboratory methods, but yet they allow some research to be taken place in people's home in a more comfortable environment.
주제 대도 아니 다제가 나로기 개주의 대비 주제 균에 지 레벨 차장 거야로부터 근데 근데 신기 내주 14부터 뒤두고 말이냐 지금 매번에 야시는 거예요. 갈간섬기 소소지 그 가와 내사기 컴바다 되줄 되기라 아니 아니데 여기 장도된 뒤야 되줄라 핑그리스.
So you can see the Muse device and the Ring devices we've been able to make available to you to be able to use in your future projects.
나는 알아서 보게 다제 하나라 파 그제 코나도 굉장히 딕제 파 꾸리였어요. 꾸리는 조였어요. 대전 나로라 단다 링디 락두는 시기 추지스도 디체 아니 심바디지 예서래. 심바단다 골고야는 주도 디 예서래.
And we'll discuss that more tomorrow morning for you. So now I'd like to describe a little bit about how sleep is related to memory and how we acquire new knowledge during the day, but also work on that knowledge while we're asleep.
텐징이 누보다 니 저와 가리 유메다 아니 니단 대요 토는 저 세종 때야 그 고도 때야도부터 저 지금 세제 윤대 때야기 고도다 세종 때야나요 니 세베가 그 세종 때부터 아니야 니 쿠베가래야 대다 대요기 지금 세탁도 가리가리요 대도 폴시아이.
And of course, learning requires practice. If you want to memorize the classic texts in your religion, you need to continue to rehearse it until you have actually committed it to memory. So rehearsal is very important. And in addition to practicing intentionally, we think practice also happens without our intention, including when we're asleep.
세종 때야다 저번 때부 사야기 그 차셔를 찍라 생아 매주 전에 아주 세신도 매주 맞이나요 양 가서래 민원 배주도 아니 왕제 교람 배주 땅나 아니 안텔레야 두도도야 돼요.
And this slide goes over some information repeated from year 4 about how memory processing takes some time for this process we call consolidation, which helps a memory be stable in your brain and available to use.
전배 유인냐면다 니야 저 뭐를 가르쳐 좀 전배냐면 되게 내가 뭐 유교에서 계속 지금 계속 내주 통례해야 된다라 네 그소래 니 국가당 대유 통례 전배 때문에 소당 tam시들이 요리스.
So now in the last few minutes, I'd like to tell you about some of our experiments that actually looked at what happens in the brain during sleep related to memory. And this is an experiment that used a method we call targeted memory reactivation, and I'll explain how that works.
근데 이 데이터야 디 그런지 나셔베 그런지 두셔베 따지시기 네트리스 따지 디노라 targeted memory reactivation 사디 닉벤 송베 쳔바짜 투 세롱세 인주 쳔바 템포 소야디 쳔바디 콩콩라 랑둥기 용마주체 쳔나 닉투체 니 유디 쳔바 체쇼 아슬랍제 쳔바 강테야기 유디 닉투고 토네 안 따지 주브제 따지 주브디 규네 나르기 쳔바디 야수체야 당 아니 템포 소야 데데 단데요 따제데스.
So the first part of the experiment was learning, and in my lab we study fact learning and skill learning and habit learning. In this case, they were learning spatial information.
그런데 따지 칸 나로라 단데 디다데요 따지 셰르 갑라 네 담보데 리바 담보데 셰종 때안데스 가르는 지 셰브체야다 안 종다체야데스 이 종다체야 나로라 나세기 그 외국인이 그리 뭐디 셰브체야다 비 하고야체 안 삼삼 라그레로 소거데 제데데 네 맹에만 매버디 제 사와 장야도 야 가시야 검시 사와던데 나라 매버디 검시 사와 차야도 되데스 단데 special learning se dukola sacha khawa chala khari dus cheni sacha khawa chala khari dus cheni sa chala USA ki ne tan deyo ki ani chongda cheya chides.
In this case, the person had to learn exactly where the picture of the cat appeared on the screen.
Tate di kapu jala ani chala khari khawa dus ya di 카와도 세세디 아니 컴퓨터 기 뇌데스 딩기 뇌디 나노라 아니 잘라 가리세 버려야 레모 가리 아니 컴퓨터 뇌 카와샤소 세니 아니 잘라 데리 잘라 지부디 컴퓨터 뇌기 네 카와샤소 세니 디니 버르기 되었다야 되스.
Actually, there were 50 different pictures, and the people had to learn the locations exactly for 50 different objects.
이제 따지게 고만 됐던데 장야 되려 왕에 스타라 리모컨기 아니 왜 가와도 없잖아요. 딕셰이자 딕셰야기 리버디 나올라 잘라 서거를 베리 민다 맞추식 모티셰브 돈에 아니 컴퓨터 그 민다 시작주고 돈에 아니 판제 디 가와 이메디 녜주 그랬어.
Perhaps that's similar to spatial learning we all do. For example, if you're working in the kitchen, you need to learn where are all the ingredients and where are all the utensils, for example.
이 지금 나도 니리 소외 나로 내도 당자는 셰비나 근데 그 전 세종 된다는 정답해야지. 그냥 아주 탑상 나로라 잘라다면다 샤에 잘라디 안에 담보데 지금 규메베 탑상제 레비나 디나로 그냥 뒤에 잘라 가리 가도 제 야부 때제 아니 저거 앱체지로 일단 더블더블스.
And after the learning was complete, we tested the people to show that they were very accurate at knowing the correct locations.
이제 다들 데이터에 나눠라 가와이에서 제세디 컴퓨터기 뇌들이 아니 요야디 레모트도데 디지털 레모트도 가와도 뇌지 셔들와 어디 제가 데이터 다시 셔부터네 주고 아니 거기 딱딱지 납둬야 되는데 중소.
Next, people went to sleep, and while they were sleeping, very quietly we presented 25 of the sounds they had heard during learning.
다시 이런 거 갑자기 내게 가와 이메지 내주니 주고 주 렌즈 따두고라 망치지가 하자는 게 듣고 싶지 나쁘고도 다시 바다가는데서 아니 니쿠주네 여러 니쿠주네 니토 코베 내가서 여기 컴퓨터 응외를 샤야게 리모트에서 다 냠도 차 단계였어요. 근데 시미르지 내면서 깨자베 냠도 잡아서는 시미 대야도 지기면도 제비입니다. 이제는 다 니코베 값도 아니 까지 세브레스.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that all of the 50 objects, each one had a corresponding sound, like the cat had a meow. All had an object, all had a sound. And our hypothesis was, if we present the sound during sleep, it will provoke them to remember the location of the object.
Then, the new Mako call and the computer in Red Kala. Lola in Red Kala, and if very Mendamida, not just the tangent, and in Mendamida Kala, you have the tangent, who will get you then, Kawatu, Shimikawa, the Kawatu, and the big, for the Tatas, not to so far. The Chonda negative to remote and Jayuki Tare the Tata, this when she made with you, Tabina, the name the Shimi Gage, Yamdo Tagios. Is a kid and Yamdo Taja, and the remote. Kawadu Sentaji Sheche, Chonda Chubris. That's on that this Shella Shabatone, and you meet the new Huju, new Hubu. And he remote idea Marota, they didn't, they will be charged to Tambaris. Tatanche, any could you Castle, Tatit and Jayugi, Espiriti, Kawaii, Miki, Chabati, either said Chigiyamate, Chabati, Chabatan Royal, Chatted, Margi. Chati da deyogi peri di kawaii sagi nedandi maje bisine chabtero soyal tentogre seneta sashado di langbaris.
And then the last part of the experiment was we tested how accurate they could remember, and our results showed that people were more accurate if we had presented the sound during the sleep. The graph shows that they had less forgetting for the objects that had the sound presented during sleep.
Then, as you go, any said that Taja said, Kabla, Nigna Tayagi, Chatayadi, Jala, not to Kanga Chatayamas, Dina alone and Nishitana Sigi, Chatambaris. Is that Chata and Chamadam Mangushasharva? Is that Sani de Sevres, any matter, and you say Taja said, Kabtu, and if Taja said that Chatane, when you say Kabtu, Chatane, Nig negative Chatan Shabe, Titan de Yuki Jala, Kawaii, second Mujin Chati. Shiragi Tigota ni set todos. Simba, Jala Nguyen Chang Sang de Ni could be negative to Tetan the chat Tangse, Yang Joshon Dacia, Gogajim Mate Sojua. This is do any word ni send it to Tatisha to do. Cham Madamba, Ni negative to Cham Madambe, Jala, Tezo, and go computer Nguyen, Kawaii met Tatisha to do, Julian, any two party those.
So the idea is that as we learn something, the information that we learn can be reactivated while we are asleep, and that benefits our ability to remember later.
Is that they touch Kuala and none of Kares Lana? But you say the negative to Karis Hansha and Nifute, kissing as the new Kuba Negavla, quality captive of chair, the set of the chair, the Kogab Rabina, they should be any Titan de Chabati Taba Yungu Jenny. That the Tine and the Taja di Tone and the Sabarochiati, Dichigioris.
And we have many more experiments that verify and extend this phenomenon, but now I want to move to a new use of the same method.
Any and the Tajidangi, net Tajidan, Mindaton, Tajiseje, any Tikange, Kandegi, some duty, Tafudi, Ratudum, the Teje, any. The Shukchimbo Ratchip the day, Chungso, Fati, Geshe chair, Agmar, Chimbajilpa, and Louise.
And the new use is with lucid dreaming, because we can have people, while they're awake, remind themselves that they should ask if they can recognize the dream as a dream. And then we can remind them of that while they are asleep to help them have a lucid dream when they understand that they are dreaming during the dream.
Milam Town and Negafu, nearly same over on the Milam Hakover D. June, and Milam near the nation to any chicky could Rangjung between Shabago Maiba, Dinaro, where's the Rang Suche, Chashi Leaki, Lea Sotubia, the deal is.
Now, when a person is in REM sleep, they are likely to be dreaming, although dreams happen in other stages of sleep as well. And when you're in REM sleep, you're also paralyzed, so you can't move your body.
안다 민구 유명 내가도 민구 유명 내가도 페이지 어디 거기 내 이름 땅이 요래 시단 이름 디 민구 유명 내가 찍어를 맞도 내가 된다 말이야 네 민구 유명 내가도 램 내가 기니 내가도 아니 페이지 이름 밀로 거기 있는 땅이 요래 레데 뒤 가지 르부데 부제 잡고 요마레 스코 샤니 데비 소치데스
Now, during the dream, even though you think you're moving your body, your sleeping body is not moving. With the exception of when you move your eyes, your sleeping body, your eyes are also moving.
민구 유명내가 또 딱한도 따지 제부터네 이나야 인사래 가리니에 열에서라나 가리 중국 열에서라나 민구 유명내가 또 르부 니 그래 나로 밀람 당게 여자 밀람 나로 르부 구제 저기 여서 밀람 당베 니 르부 뭐네 구제 저기 말아서 또 샤브로 찬 데리 열에서 이나야 디 내가 또미 구제 저기 삼바다 미 구제 잡다 데 제비나 미 구제 잡다고 미 구제 잡 미도 미 구제 잡기 여서 뭐도 잡기 인사도 삼바이나 그 삼바다 냠도 미 뭐네랑 구제 잡에 용비 열에서
So we were able to instruct people that if you are in your dream and you know that you are having a dream, make an eye movement where you move your eyes to the left, to the right, to the left, and to the right. And we can see that in our recordings of the electrical activity shown here. This is a person moving their eyes left, right, left, right.
So the instructions were given when they were awake.
When they were asleep.
When they were asleep, were they told to do that beforehand?
Sorry, yes, they were told beforehand while they were awake to do that.
Okay. Then, ni mabu kon la konto le chonda jaya de la, kalap jaya de la kisi mingu nyume negab su keba cheni. Tab mingu nyume negab su ni milam tangwe negab sus. Milam mingu nyume negab ki milam iba. Milam tangi yorangi she kablas. Ani she kabla ani mi ye da la gujo jabu je sema tagi namyu chine ranging guru go ta mingu nyume negab su yoba ti rangi yoba she kabla ti she ge yoba de mazula da ta da la ani ni mi ye da du chine reme chine gujo jabu je labis.
Now, in another experiment, we told people to signal when they know they're having a lucid dream, and then also to answer our questions. And here's some results from that experiment.
Then, yeah, I left something from before. I will continue here. Then, today, motu shave kabla. Ani ni kone unera mingu nyume nega ni la lebache. Take of the milam tangi of shave kabla. Again, ni seven negatives to Lambda Seven, she changa conjure me changa, Parim the debitone, yearly you, then the charity. Big Bujotone say to any let's say low region, because let's low remark, make glory no less sessions. Sorry, Nibadi, could you please repeat the next one?
From here?
Yeah, from here.
Yes. So here we see on the left is a period of awake, and you can see high muscle activity, EMG. And here is a period in red where they are in REM sleep, and you can see very low muscle activity because the body is paralyzed.
Then that could have you the Migu negative to nearly Teddy Kane, nearly you Kane, and in Chilola, you can meet Chiga, and you could mean for the past to Dalent only said it. This Peter Dave need to share on this. The day Remonala, the Remonian shall say they need 7 negative, and Casore. So let's say Lorina say remote. You know, what the EMG said. Any Casori Shanning would never the ni seven negative Shanning would the Hajan Tukudua, the Shanning would do Rata, remote chadi, Marvel chair, nibody, any new COVID negative. Did you any Magiwa the EMG said the Shanning would do but the Hajan was
In blue, we have the EEG of REM sleep, and in red, we have the EOG, the eye movements.
아니 다 레모 마오체네 마오나 여기 친구들 이주 민구 유민네가기 내단 찍고래 내단 찍고래 이나야 낙선 뭐나 여댕인디 레텔로리래 레베기 첼레기 레베 첼레 두당기 나바 레메나세데 마보디 민구 유민네가기 미구 구주기 나바 레메나세데.
And this person was told, if you realize you're in a dream, make a signal, left, right, left, right, left, right. And that's what they did right here with a signal. They were essentially saying, I'm having a lucid dream with a code. The code was left, right, left, right, left, right.
And that the dinner mingu movie nega we chicken dig nangi mig we get down in an day and then quirky chama ye the donkey number 10 years reminal. Big hatting you as a man and mingu nega ni million in the shape negative ratios and so that angioris. That I the kind of lagumara, shake marwa, ni say mezam. In a mig good japsos, mig yet and you would chama japsos labjet, and it could do chama good jabadi, remenal sage, any Nazuchilo you can sola, Koran Migun negative, million shave nega ratio, million tangitu, Migun million in the shave nega ratios and labioris.
So when the dreamer made this signal to show that he was in a lucid dream, the experimenter was watching. And at this point in time, where this line is, the experimenter issued a question to the sleeper. And the question was, what is 8 minus 6?
That the day Tachi negative, Migi, Datang, the Tony, when I'm being negative, Iba, and million in the shave negative ratios in it, that Datang, the Ratu. And then the Taj teach Yatua, take Yapta, teach some de la Chilo Tachi Sigandigi, and it Nagalamni Tibutis. Yene took Tena Kazures and Tiburis.
And the question was very soft, so it didn't wake up the dreamer. And the dreamer knew to expect math questions, but didn't know which math questions.
Then get Hadushu to begin the new Torua, didn't have Demo Yene took Tena Kazures and Laveris. And Lavne, then the Tachi is a digla, then Tachi Majicone, to do any kind of Datang Datang Bangladesh, and can to be anti the Jew to love your wrist. In anti the Jew to Karigo in the love your wrist. Is that you can dig anti the day to which could be which the Hagu your Kari machine your wrist.
So 2 seconds later, the dreamer answered the question that he heard by moving his eye movements the number of times to answer the question. He answered correctly with the number 2.
That Migu negative Yena, you have a data to me, Yama, you just use a level. That you ever have good and that Chivati Quiver. Chivaku in Chivati land, Magalam like Marwa. That me good general love years and me good day, any lamb carrying a knee, me good Tomani, so me good Thomas do jazz, is a land that me with Tomani Japsos.
So this and several other examples demonstrated that we could communicate between an experimenter and a person in the midst of a dream during verified REM sleep.
Today is that I had years, Lamna, Chilo, you miss sympathetic, there are miss sympathetic tongue, and ni Kune, you have a Hansila, ni Tang, ni Rimba, Nansek Riben alone, Mingu, you may never be ni Yimba, several half cover. Captain Spine, and you Kubila, you go digging into the Yamdo, any ballet on a chair, you want to dinner.
Now, we used math questions because we wanted to be able to verify that the answers were correct. But now we can use the method to also ask people about their dreams, both when they wake up later, but also at the moment they are having the dream as well.
Nanda data is a Kala and Angzi the day of Chivaku, the Quibina, who land the Angzin and Jaguiza, Angzin Jabu, me good Jamni land, Tedang land, Tedang, Tashi, good Jam Chainza, and me good Japengi, Japengi China, and Tangati, and the Tentu, the Pendation Cheveris. Shaba 나도 지금 다시 단대디 단대요 다시 심바치야디 아니 가르레 니 코베 네급수 아니 집었다데데 따야다 데탈 아니 그저 렌타야다 아니 세베 주고 아니 데데 라베가 그냥 가르쳐서 가르쳐서 전 얌그 가서 진단을 잡지 니 내주셔야도 데데 코네 니라 네베 네급수 아니 제도 잡았다 제도 잡았디 균에 가르쳐서 빌런체 인그리스.
So I'm a little bit familiar with the practice in your tradition known as dream yoga. And so I contacted Alan Wallace to ask whether some of the classic texts have examples of communicating with someone dreaming in the interest of aiding the dream yoga practice.
나도 나 지난 남주 지난에 벽이 배규 남된 나로라 밀람 당대에 아니 냠내 거다 하바도 니기네 저 밀람기네 저 어때 거면 거 이제 고뇨 히스디 아니 근데 라규 유행기 kushop 엘렌 웰레스 나 간디슈제 니 쿠베 네급수 니 쿠쿠베 예바 시샤 제비토네 다동 데라 칠로 미지기 자와치당 자와 랭 하소레 달레 톤레 제야 데데기 내단데 유데비데 두에스네 간디슈디 응콩게 디송종 디텐종 선다 레베 베마르 레베 베마주네기 파트 투기 파트 넘버 2 거기 아니 송주도 되네 농된디 나오죠.
So this brings up many interesting things to talk about. For example, we wonder how signals could be made in the context of dream yoga, and whether the teacher who will instruct the student to have an intention to have a particular activity like transformation or visualization during a lucid dream, could they also give the instructions during sleep to remind the individual to engage in the practice that they intend as part of their spiritual pursuits?
쟤네 데데네 주의나 아니면 저 사원인데 다 다지셔야 사원도 되게 그리고 사원도 얘기를 했으나 밀람게 내줘 냠len 제베 값수 아니 저기 시그널인데 창아 최도년에 창아 시그널인데 소지 다진인데 당제 다진 달렌토레 제야 다진인데 소투그레스 아니야 근데 내 로종 두아 인주 추적이 냠len 추적이 냠len 페나 아니 추적이 냠len 차식 나노라 밀람게 내가수 디겐기 로 디겐기 아니 롭주라 language tugurbes dane tang tugube ta bina kad de chanang duwa senang hai senang gi kom de yungwa hai senang gi kom gi nyam de da ani sem gi duwa de da satu lo ta inju request de creative ne request de ya ta ya chojo gi chegu de shu ya de le ya de che de ma chi sin kuma to ya de gi kapchi chia yo jos.
Well, there's a lot more to talk about, but Robin, I have a feeling we're near the end. Shall I jump ahead to my last slide and then we can have a break after that? Yeah. So I'd love to talk about these things more with you, but just to conclude for now, and we can get back to things, I think the first person perspective on sleep is very useful, but we get additional insights from adding more perspectives on sleep and to help us to try to understand sleep better.
아니 코드 지게 요레스 아니 되게 탑식 때 요레스 아니 이게 꼴라 지용기 것도 영어를 맞을 분도 용 근데 네가 냠도 대비나 아니던데 여기 네 주마도 차 상보로야 보여 가보로 시야 분도 요레스.
And lastly, with this kind of work, we hope we can help people appreciate the importance of sleep and use it to try to be healthier, to learn better, to be more creative is another thing I didn't get to talk about, and perform your daily activities and improve your well-being. These are all many potential benefits of sleep that I think are aligned with some of the dream yoga ideas as well.
그래서 된대기 신주시에 되기 전에 편도기 찬에 삼다변에 가리용 소고랬으나 아니 니디 개체부이부디 베테 따제기 아니 라디오기 돈에 밀라 미신발라 아니 녜덴치야 개발요레스 라디오치야 개발요레스 니 편도 가리거리 유메 근데 시에트야 이 시에부 디 돈에 아니 미 수수 니던데 최den기 아니 내당 톤덱체야 얘네 지기 남주지 시야다 장야다 때야 토야 사 하고야 돼 매주 지기 어때 이 제야라 ramde chigendi ni biga del donan sebina antela epento yuyo ba tenasi nire gi chitoso chego namsha jubya duzula ine dingma de namyune ni yabu kuguyuna chego namsha duzula shudandi 지금 민다고 전에 그때 처음부터 ni 미국도네 축침부 주에다 자가 제고도 조이네 준비 야보세요 근데 이 편도 뭐 전에 경영이 고주 대답라 양대 즉 통대 가야 되는데 편도 연구에서 아니 단대 다지도 두부 있는 두부들라 밥에 계산다 편도기 전에 들으셔야 돼요.
Thank you so much, Geshe Dadul.
기질라 드시세요.
Thank you so much, Ken. That was so interesting and so wonderful.
게게라 드시세요. 네, 감시 하장하기 때 뭐사실 분나서 드시세요.
And I think the connections to dream yoga, lucid dreaming, and neuroscience is fascinating.
네, 단단히 심배 밀람 그나주 밀람 당마스부도 밀람 당마다 나아주 제조나라 아니 니기 내죠 밀람 내죠 대조단데 여기 괜히 바로기 괜히 자와하리 예매 거기니 비스무탄 네 이제 떠난게시다 아니 단단히 응감요에서
So unless we have any announcements, we'll take a 30-minute break and then we'll come back and learn a little bit about the neuroscience of emotion.
네, 다다 직신의 대표로데 세다는데 나에도 하오래. 이 맵이네 다 단지 바로데 말씀지샤제 네, 야 nomdu 있는 거지. 셈용된데 네, 완전 세딩 내단지 내도 얘기 있어.
So we'll see you soon.
양조 제가 제용